and welcome. Hello. Is anyone out there? Hello.
Hi.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you. So we're gonna get started tonight by talking a little bit, getting some contextualization going on. I'm Sydney Monroe, and I am the Youth Programs Manager at the Theater Offensive, and I'm also the lead artist on this project, Heart Matter. So today I hurriedly put together a presentation because I was like, wow, maybe some people are coming into the space and don't have a lot of understanding about what has been the process and or what has been the work to get to this moment, and how that sits and how this work continues to evolve and progress. This is like not a lecture hall, but like it's just a really weird dynamic of like theater and like lecturing. So this is like my slide. Please don't chop me if there's any spelling errors. So, Heart Matter, stories and interviews. If you didn't know, that's the show you're here to see. Ta-da! And this is tonight's agenda. So we are currently in welcome and project overview. Going excellent. We're then going to move into the actual stage reading. So tonight is going to be a stage reading. So you'll see actors and performers reading off their books. Minimal blocking. Come on in, friends. We're just doing like welcome and overview. Come on in. Yes. Oh my God. This is the most like amazing lecture I've ever given, by the way. Just to have like your friends and community members walking in as you're like, yes. So we'll go through the stage reading, and at the end of tonight, there's a very brief kind of talk back audience discussion. So we would like to get your feedback, your input, and just maybe what resonated with you. Cool. So let's get into the project overview. You probably can't read that, and that's okay. I'll give you a quick summary. So how this came about. The True Colors Creative Action Crew, or CAC, was the recipient of the National Performance Network and the Visual Artists Network Creation Fund. Essentially, this is an organization that brings together artists and presenting companies and then provides an opportunity to commission new work, set up opportunities for artists to present their work across the nation, and or for us to just dialogue about what it means to be presenting work, creating work in the various spaces that we do. So the Creative Action Crew submitted a grant proposal, and we got it. And we're one of the first youth-based kind of ensembles to get it, and we're really excited to be promoting LGBTQ and queer and trans people of color issues and stories. So this process is a 3-year process, and I've broken it into 3 phases that I'll talk to you a little bit more about. But this first phase is creation. So over the course of 3 years, you create a work, you refine the work or develop it, and then you take it on a national tour. And so we are in year 1, phase 1, and we are nearing the end of the creation phase. Some general notes is that as the lead artist on this project, something that I was interested in doing was doing a piece about queer and trans people of color. And that kind of started for me around what's important to pass on to the next generation of cutie pies. So here's a quick timeline of how things have been progressing. In April of 2017, we received the award letter. In July, we started devising in the summer. I had a cohort of 5 young adults, young people working with me who were interested in this project. Also, we started collaborating with, I was like, we need collaborators. We need more stories. And so then I reached out to the LGBTQ Elders of Color group here in Boston, and they were more than happy to be like, yeah, we'll come and hang out, we'll eat your free food, we'll tell you some stories, and we were like, bet, let's do it. So in the month of July, we started meeting with folks. It was a group of anywhere from 18 to 24-year-olds in the CAC, and then we had 3 or 4 participants from the Elder Queer group, and they were anywhere from 67 to 71. just some other timeline things. I was having a beer when I was doing this presentation too. So in August we took vacation and I went to P-Town and other shenanigans, lulz. And then September we came back, we started doing more work. And in the September, what we started doing is we started devising. So what we call is this process of kind of creating work, talking about it, using other source material, bringing in other thoughts, and just kind of like a laboratory. We also started in September conducting interviews. So this is when the project really kind of took off. One of the things that I had the young people that I was working with do is I had them come up with 3 to 5 community members that they wanted to find out about their QTPOC youth experience. That was one of the reasons is that there was a very limited amount of people in the room. And 2, I wanted to expand that so it just wasn't this kind of insular group of folks being like, yep, this is what it means to be a queer and trans person of color, without engaging these other folks in the conversation. By October, the project shifted. So I had this like amazing plan. I was like, we're gonna do this, we're gonna change the world, it's gonna be so perfect. And it just like totally fell apart on me. So I had to restructure the project. The young people that I was working with couldn't commit to some of the deliverables of the project, and they just had their own shit to deal with. And they had to take care of that. And there was no shade in that. It just meant that I needed to respond to the feedback I was getting and adjust the project. So what that meant is that then I reached out to True Colors and TTO alums and family members. I also reached out to queer and trans people of color in the Boston community. And I asked them, hey, do you want to be a part of this project? Can I interview you? Are you interested in coming in and devising and working with some of this material? And I got an overwhelming response. So much so that then over the next 4 weeks, I pretty much did about 15 to 16 interviews alone. And then with the other interviews that the young people did, we had about 40 to 50 hours of interviews. So then I had to go through all of it. So what I've been doing since Thanksgiving break up until this point is that I've been going through and coding all of the interviews. I've been listening to everyone's stories, and I've been starting to find where we converge and where we diverge. Some more timeline things. This is again the phases I was telling you about. Right now, you're experiencing phase 1, which is the creation. And then phase 2, which will happen in 2018, we're gonna mount a production or productions for a local tour. So we need to test out and figure out what it means to take a piece like this on tour. And more specifically, what are the systems that need to be in place to support queer and trans bodies of folks of color who are also doing this work in communities across the nation. And there's not a lot of previous molds or formats of what that looked like, and so we have to develop those. Phase 2 is also fostering community buy-in and dialogue. So one of the things we want to continue to do is that this conversation is not over. There's a lot of material that's not being presented tonight, and so how do we continue to build investment in this project and then also fold in other voices that can keep expanding what these experiences mean. Phase 3 is the national tour, and that's going to happen in 2019 and 2020, and I'll tell you about our tour later. So, the artistic process, where I started. So some questions and some assumptions. So I started by assuming that for LGBTQ plus folks, you have some kind of queer community, right? You have some kind of queer family tree, you have some kind of support system that helps you be you and gets you through. And that was a big assumption. And here were some of the questions I started to ask. So, what does your queer family tree look like? What has been your queer and trans people of color youth experience? What's important to pass on to the next generation of queer and trans people of color? Something I started to find out as soon as I got into this is that I needed help. reached out to the Institute of Contemporary Art, and this is some of the other folks that I was collaborating with, and I started bringing in a lot of different folks into the room. So the Institute of Contemporary Art is one of our co-commissioners for this project, so they paid to be a part of the creation of this work. And they have a really awesome youth program as well, and just some amazing visual artists. So I reached out to them and I said, hey, would you be interested in sending some of your youth to hang out with our youth and our elder queers and engage in a conversation? So not only do we have intergenerational folks in the room of POC experiences, but now we have different types of artists in the room talking about how to approach the work from a variety of angles. Because we were primarily approaching it from a performance standpoint. Responding to responses. So I would ask these questions, and then after a couple weeks and more folks started to be folded into the interview process, the questions started to evolve, right? So I realized that a lot of folks maybe didn't have queer families or support systems, or they looked different from other people. There were people here in Boston who were not from this area but came here, and there were certain experiences they had in the South or the Midwest or somewhere else that was influencing how they navigated this space. So that's just to say that the questions started to evolve, the project started to evolve. It didn't look the same, and it wasn't on the same trajectory. The more things change, the more they stay the same. I started to find out that a lot of things hadn't changed for queer and trans people of color. There were a lot of folks dealing with mental health. There were a lot of folks dealing with microaggressions and racism. There were a lot of folks dealing with being multiracial and biracial and a variety of nuances in religion and performance and gender. Also, in a group of folks that are 18 to 71, even just the vocabulary we use to talk about our experiences was drastically different. And we celebrated that, but it just made it a little bit difficult to land on exactly what that was. This quote is up here because even, and we'll talk about this later tonight, even with folks who were either interviewed or devising, or you yourselves, you will probably see connections in these stories from someone 40 years ago, and it's still very relevant to the QTPOC youth experience today. Wow, I went off in this presentation. Where we're headed! So great, set design. I'm giving a shout out to Kat Nakaji, who's in the house, not only in the 90s cultural reference way, but actually in the theatrical spaces way. Thank you. Kat Nakaji is a set designer, and if you didn't have a chance to engage with any of these materials up here, they were designed by Kat Nakaji. And Kat is also asking for some input from you, so at the end of the show, if you want to stop by here with one of your TTO pins that was located with your program, you can fill out a post-it and leave us your feedback. We also have to, in this phase two, something that's going to get added to this production is live and original music. We also have to create movement vocabulary. Part of my aesthetic is very movement-based, so I have a dance background. So you won't see a lot of that tonight, but it's something that has to be folded into this text. And more discussion. So the conversation isn't over. If you want to be involved with this project, if you want to know more, if you want me to just unleash all of what I've been dealing with on it, and you want to like tussle with that too, please grab one of my cards or leave your information on your survey. So now let's get to some organizational things. So turn off, silence your devices. And I actually should do that for myself because I'm usually the main one. And then we need to locate our exits. Thank you. And in case of an emergency, and there's no photography or recording. Hey, Ernie. Ernie's just like so amazing, just love him. And then afterwards, there's a brief talk back, and I'm gonna invite the actors, and if there are any interviewees or devisers that are here tonight that would like to come up and join the panel, or the discussion or something of that nature, you're welcome to. You don't have to. If you cannot stay for the talk back, located in your program is like a very brightly colored half-page survey. Please fill that out, and if you can't hand it to me directly, you can leave it on the table outside. That's right outside in the lobby. Promotion. So, True Colors Troupe, which is another performance ensemble we have for LGBTQA young people ages 14 to 21. They have a community performance similar to this one on Monday at the Powell Arts Center. It's free and open to the public. And this show is focusing on what does self-care look like for LGBTQA youth. You can go to TTO Boston, just like you did, or some of you did tonight, to get tickets for that as well. More promotion! So after that, next Thursday, yes, I believe, Nelson Amasquita Cifuentes, who is a resident Colombian artist here with the Theater Offensive, is doing a performance at the Black Indian Inn. And you, again, can go to ttoboston.org to get tickets for that or more information. Disclaimer, there is full frontal nudity. Some people are into that, some people are not. You choose. Thank you for entertaining me. And again, please enjoy Heart Matter, Stories and Interviews.
How does queerness relate to you, or how do you relate to queerness? It affects how other people view us.
I relate to queerness when the moment I went to high school, because these are all new people in regardless of situation.
Oftentimes
they don't matter.
putting value,
like I said,
society's like here to
I'd be taught these things. This is wrong, and you shouldn't
what it means as a straight Christianity. I need to work what it means to attract people that are like this, especially makes me racist,
queer, and I feel like if people just make that expression, it's reflective of something about themselves, like they feel restricted and something
because I am restricted.
I realized that I was gay. I realized that I was not accepting the world. People always mistake my gender, and I still identify as gender, but in a way, like I was taught, like I felt like I was taught
More observant than I used to be, making sure that I was safe or like others around me are safe and I'm trying to like
don't trust nobody.
Observing of my surrounding in my area to know like how I feel like
if I were not queer around different perspectives, probably off.
my energy changes based off of my environment, and I think that's what like this is about navigation and control and energy that people still try to reform queerness where to mirror heteronormativity and we're not, and I don't still fit in the norm. I'm trying to accept that I'm a man. Forgive me, I have sex with other men, but the notion of acting like a stereotypical or traditional being a man, how it's just required, still a silence thing that's required.
Being queer makes me feel free.
Thanks for being here today.
Let's start with your name, age, and pronouns, and how you identify.
Whatever
that
means
means for you. I'm 26 years old.
I'm 18 years
lesbian
old,
woman.
and I identify as
Davis,
His pronouns.
My name is
And I
Black.
identify as
and I
queer.
identify
21.
as
I
identify
identify
as
as
gay, queer.
I identify as queer in regards to my gender, which is more of a gender fluid spectrum. And queer in sexuality and pansexual, no necessary binary or anything.
The whole idea around identity is to find some language and some way to accept yourself for who you are. And so at some point, society is always in there saying,
You're not Black. You're a nigga.
You know you're not a woman, you're a bull dyke.
All the negative stuff comes in.
When I started to identify myself as a lesbian, I started to embrace the term lesbian and accept what it meant for me. I'm not overly, feminine, and I'm not overly masculine. I'm somewhere comfortably in the middle with myself.
I identify as queer as part of my identity, both sexual and political.
I'm gay. Personally, I define gay as men who like men. I use gender to make sense of it nowadays. Gender is changing. People that have their own identity, queer identity, I guess, I still want my penis.
So I'm Alex, I'm 20 years old. I use they, them, theirs primarily, but I also use he, him, his, and I identify as black as fuck, queer as fuck, and unapologetic as fuck.
My name is Jamil, or Princess Ali. I'm 24 years old. I use he and she pronouns, and I identify as a queer person in the community and as a drag entertainer.
The labels that I definitely embrace are being queer, being black, being pansexual, being a woman, being a human, being a person, being somebody who exists in this society like anybody else.
I embrace all those labels because it's taken me a while to find them, to be comfortable with them, and to just feel, it helps me feel, they help me feel like I can fit in, like some level of society.
Okay, I consider myself generally trans femme, a trans feminine person. Before I would have just said I'm a transgender woman, but I feel like there's some, I wouldn't say debate, but like there's so much confusion around that as well.
Yeah, I don't like to be identified. I don't think it doesn't matter. I think categories and boxes and classifications are for someone else, that they make that person feel comfortable. It's always like, so what are you?
Yeah, I think that I was thinking about that on the way here, where I found like a lot in my life, especially in high school on, that people would see me as this ephemeral person, And I think that like my racial ambiguity plays into that. That, and also that I'm not someone who you can't really expect who I'm gonna be attracted to or who I'm gonna try to pursue. I think my queer and multiracial identities definitely work off each other. I think sometimes about how if I were to fit a racial mold more, what I might then not be expected to do, and how that might force me into situations where I feel uncomfortable.
I identify as a gay Chinese American.
I'm a lesbian.
I'm definitely 41 years old. I identify as a queer femme, and depending on who I'm talking to, I identify as a queer aggressive femme.
I am 24. I use and prefer she and her for pronouns. I am mixed, black, multiracial, multi-ethnic, racially ambiguous.
Oh, I'm queer when people ask me, I guess. Mostly, I operate in being attracted to many people and many things about those people, but not really. I don't feel connected to either being heterosexual or homosexual, strictly because I find a lot of different things attractive and a lot of things not attractive.
I'm 22 years old. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I identify as a woman. I also identify as a theater artist, and also sexual orientation-wise, I don't know. I fluctuate between queer, bisexual, other, open. That's always been kind of an ongoing internal debate.
That's always been kind of an ongoing internal debate.
How do you use these words to understand your identity?
Let me start by saying that I feel like I have white privilege. And I feel that my white privilege has allowed me, in my own brand of being a Chinese American, to be more operable in spaces that are predominantly white people. I think there are certain biases,
especially right now in this moment with the global economy, is that there are towards Asian Americans. And I think because of my privilege and socioeconomic class, that allows me to be lumped in with a little bit of that. So on the one hand, it's what I gained from that, right, is that it is very easy for me to operate, I guess, kind of like a white person. I'm just gonna say it. But on the other hand, it makes me feel that I will never be able to truly connect with and identify as Asian American in the sense of what that brings to mind for the majority of people in this moment.
If you're now calling yourself a femme, you're supposed to be a certain type of femme to make sense to people. Because when you come out of that lane again, then it doesn't make sense. I was a femme that was playing contact football and I would paint my face every time. But they never understood.
How? Or why are you putting on mascara?
Coach, because listen, I could beat her ass and beat my face all at the same time. I don't have to look like a bugbear to play this game. And just because you're expecting all of the girls on this team to be butch or tomboyish, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just not that person. And I'm not going to be her for you.
My name is Jamila. It's been a year fresh with that name. And I'm loving it. I'm 21. I'm homosexual, who's gender fluid. I go by she and he as preferred pronouns. There's a reason to that, which is a lot bit more personal. We'll get to that later.
I identify as a queer Latina, female identifying person.
It's basically like any imposter syndrome. It's when you believe yourself to be something. No, I guess you just feel like an imposter wherever you are. I've just been thinking about how, from that last interview, just like dissecting, my racial identity, parts of me that made me feel very insecure in my own understanding of my racial identity. Maybe that is part of thinking about my race in general.
I think, okay, it's a little bit complicated because it's like, I guess for me, my experience has on both sides. So like, in the Colombian culture specifically, there's a really rigid idea of what beauty looks like, constantly toggling between what does it mean to be the ideal Colombian beauty and what does it mean to be the ideal American beauty, and never fitting into both of those. My stepmom, my whole ass life, she would tell me,
you could be so beautiful if you lost however many pounds.
Because I have a pretty face. I have long eyelashes, I have eyebrows, I have long hair, I have all the tools, but I needed to lose all of this weight and then I would be perfect.
I wonder too, because I think that if it felt connected to my gender when I was younger, I think that I felt a lot of expectations in terms of being a girl and how to lure someone in, as opposed to like pounce.
Hunt.
Prey upon.
Devour.
Yeah, you're not on the offensive or hunting, you're kind of dormant, like on some Sleeping Beauty bullshit.
I really started using that word when I was in high school, and I was doing a job where I was working with someone who identified as genderqueer, and I was really attracted to them. Up until that point, I had never felt too comfortable with the idea of being bi or bisexual, and I didn't know why. And then I met this person who was genderqueer, and I thought,
Oh well, I really like you too. I don't know what that is.
so then I started to use queer as a word to kind of file me for other people.
I'm getting used to it again because young people seem to use queer more than older people. But older people have distinctive tastes for the word queer because it's a sort of like the N-word back in the day. Well, it was said as a derogatory adjective. So I was a little concerned when I heard it from younger people who accepted it. That took me back because it brought back memories of when it was used against friends of mine who were queer or gay, but didn't identify as queer because queer meant awkward or different, or as opposed to gay or straight. I think gay is more of a happy word.
So just the culture of taking back something like the word queer has such historical implications in a very negative way.
I didn't really get that until I went to college. I didn't really get the ownership of that it can be turned into a positive identifier. So I still kind of struggle with that a little bit. I found myself being attracted to people who did not identify as women.
And because of that, the word gay or the word lesbian just doesn't seem to really fit me anymore.
But I still didn't quite know if there was a word that does.
If that makes sense.
In your last interview, coming out was something that came up?
Would you like to say more?
There's always a balancing act of being black and queer.
It was far less about the marginalization of black gay men, black queer people, and black trans people. But it was far more about interaction with white gay men. Coming out and moving to Boston, I entered a space where white gay men strictly saw me as a black dick. You're not the only gay. You're not just only gay, but you're also black. And that's something you're always gonna be reminded about.
In the gay community?
In the gay community, within gay social apps.
Say more about that.
You got a lot of questions like,
I want your black dick, or
Nigga, come over here. Or with a hard ER, nigger, what's up? Or
I don't want to talk to you, nigger.
What other messages were you hearing about being black and gay and black and queer?
you already have one strike in this world being black. Do you want another?
it's gonna be harder for you if you're gonna be black and gay.
Black and gay, that's a myth.
Black men can't be gay. Black people can't be gay.
They aren't supposed to be gay.
This is the deep-rooted stigma around just the idea of someone being black and gay, especially if you live in Dorchester or areas of color. Like you live in Dorchester, it's not acceptable. And people who smirk at you, people who laugh at you.
But in particular, surrounding when I wanted to come out at the end of high school, my depression and anxiety were the highest that I'd ever been. My dad and stepmom didn't believe that I had depression and anxiety.
I was just wondering, where I went, that was where I was. And I didn't have any support system until I ran into this lady, and she was very religious, but she understood youth. And more importantly, she understood my needs. And we connected, and for me, she saved my life because I was really on a destructive path at that point. We'd be sitting on a stoop. We had a little stoop that we used to sit on. And now she had 5 kids, all by different men. And we'd sit on the stoop, and I'd tell her, I don't understand how my father could throw me out. I don't understand how my stepmother's so mean. And all of that, and she would say,
Well, it's not so much what they're doing. What do you want to do? What are you gonna do with your life?
and I'm like, I don't know what I want to do. I want to sleep all day.
Across the street from me, there was a kid named Nico. I hung out with him, also hung out with his mom a lot. We were very close. His sister, their family. I'll never forget the first time meeting Nico. This white, pasty-looking kid comes up to me and says,
What up, my nigga?
My first instinct is to slap him and say, you don't call me that. Later, when we were at his home, his mom tells me,
No, he's black. He's just white. He just looks white. He's Brazilian.
I now know that he ain't black, he shouldn't be saying the N-word, and he deserves multiple slaps. But his mother actually knew I was gay. And I remember just one day breaking down and feeling really depressed. I feel really sad.
Why? Are you hiding something?
I think I am. And then I eventually just said that I think I'm gay. And she's like,
I think you could be.
and it was a beautiful moment because she actually told me that she would keep it a secret until I was fully ready to come out. And I'll never forget that because if it wasn't for her, then I wouldn't be at any of the places I've gone to.
Also, another person I came out to, because I did 2 times, 1.0 and 2.0, my music teacher, Mr. Sam, in high school. He was out as being gay, and he was also black. And I remember, once again, being confused and stuff and being very sad, feeling like I couldn't be myself. And eventually, he broke it down for me.
What's really troubling you?
The fact that I might be gay, And I just started crying and crying and crying. So, coming out 3.0 rolled around, my mom was like,
So are you gay?
no, this isn't supposed to be how it goes down. You're supposed to be crying.
Yeah, I don't have time for all that shit.
I'm supposed to be like, it's okay, I'm still your son.
Yeah, I don't have time for all that shit. So are you gay?
I might be bi, I think, like.
Okay, that's interesting.
Is there like a 4.0 or a 5.0?
Never came out to her as non-binary, so.
The machismo that exists in the Latino community is like I feel, and I don't know, I feel like Latino men can be a lot more oppressive and violent towards
women.
Women.
In my experience, it's a constant assault against the body.
You need to be really hot all the time and you need to cook.
That's still a thing that my uncles try to place upon everybody. It's real. It's still so deeply ingrained in all of my first generation friends that are Latinas. It's the same thing. We talk about it all the time. How my initial impulse when I walk into a room with a man is to become subservient or literally not know how to communicate because it's so deeply ingrained in our culture.
I was not out in high school. There was this one gay kid and everyone knew him.
Ooh, Carlos is looking at me in this weird way. Why is Carlos licking his lips when he looks at me?
You think he's licking his lips maybe because they were chapped?
No, he was licking his lips because he wanted me.
I wasn't out at the time, so I respond with, "Oh, no homo, that's gross. So glad I'm a man and not gay." And every time I would consider coming out, I would think, well, people are making fun of Carlos, and people say,
It's okay to be gay.
but people are making fun of Carlos.
Our high school has a GSA.
People are making fun of the GSA. Why would I risk my safety or risk the comfort? Yeah, I was afraid.
So when I was in the second grade, I got reprimanded for kissing little girls in elementary school. It was a Catholic school. I was a Baptist kid. I was one of a handful of black families in that school. So my mother got the call to come up to school maybe because I was like kissing little girls on the mouth in the second grade, like, good morning, mwah. So she had several heart attacks. That was the first time I remember something I felt was normal being wrong.
Well, like I said, when I was a kid, 70,000 years ago, lesbians were not talked about. I mean, we knew they were there, but no one spoke about them. Or you sucked your teeth, or you just dismissed them because it was less than 10%, or so people thought. I think it's more than 10% now. So it's more accepted now because I think younger people are coming out earlier and earlier, and parents either have to accept it or, lose their children. So I think it's more accepted now. But like I said, with Trump in office and everyone losing their rights, who knows what's going to happen in the next 10 years?
I think it's coming. I think the alt-right church, Bible, people are using the Bible worse against gay people more and more because of the situation politically that we are facing. But I think if we stick to our true colors and not let the people who say we have a voice and we march and do our own thing, I don't think that this political climate will win. Let's put that away. We are stronger now. We are not going back in the closet and being out for so many and being in the closet after being out for so many years.
This was a really bad period of my dad and I's relationship, even though I consider myself much closer to him. And it was definitely like me pushing people away because I assumed they would reject me, even though no one I've come out to has in any way outright rejected me. It's been mostly self-rejection. I was waiting till I was 18 to leave Islam because my dad's mom told me that when you're an adult, if you choose to leave and you do things that are bad, the sin doesn't go on your father anymore. Now that I'm adult, and this doesn't count as his sin.
Everyone was in Palm Beach for my dad's birthday. And I'm Jamaican. You know, if you know anything about Jamaicans run their fucking mouth. So I decided, you know what? I'm going to come out to everybody now. So I sat my mom and dad down before the dinner started. And I said, okay, I'm going to tell you something. And I wrote them a letter. Then I gave it to my mom, and she read it and just started crying. And she was crying because she thought,
am I a bad mother? Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you feel comfortable telling me?
And I had to explain to my parents that coming out is an experience for us as LGBTQ people, you know, and it's imperative that we come out to ourselves first before we come out to anyone else, you know, and I had to work through that in myself, right?
I knew that I was gay. I knew I liked boys from a young age, but I was also sexually assaulted by 2 cousins, and I was convinced that this in turn was God's doing on my life. Thought it was God's doing because I was gay. I explained and opened up to my parents about that, and after I finished, my dad said,
I already knew that. We're late to dinner. Get your shoes on. We gotta go.
Then at dinner, I gave up to give our dad a toast and thanked him for being a great father. And I told my family, you know, I'm grateful to my dad for accepting me as a young, gay, black male. And literally, you could have heard a needle drop. So that was my coming out experience to my family, to my parents.
What other messages did you hear about being out or not being out?
Well, I mean, in general, the code down south for sure. The Midwest is you just don't put all your business in the street.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like,
ooh, who do I talk to work this out?
baby, you either gotta get a journal or take it to God. Because you will tell nobody. You know, there wasn't any child trauma survey or positive parenting.
yeah, so there was that. There was also my friends, and they're like, oh, you shouldn't walk that way. Why do you talk that way? Why do you do this? You can't do this. You gotta walk straight. Like, what does straight look like? You gotta walk, you gotta put a little pimp into it. I'm like, what? They're trying to show me how to pimp walk and stuff like that. They would make me go up to girls and hit on them.
You need to try and get a girl.
I don't think I need anyone. I also had to fight. Fighting was one of the biggest things.
What else is a part of your experience?
Oh my gosh. I do not like basketball. I'm saying it like to the recorder. Like, if anything you take away from this, I do not like basketball. I do not want to bounce a ball. I do not like the way it dribbles up and down the court. The whole Bow Wow craze. I love that song, but I don't like playing it.
I love basketball players though.
I was bullied in middle school. They were trying to help me essentially, and they thought the best way to help would be by fighting back. Personally, I didn't need to always fight back. Maybe I can. Maybe there are other ways. I don't want to fight. So they would actively hit me, actively push me, and push me, and push me, till they could almost get me to the point where I would actually fight.
I realized that I liked boys when I was 5 years old. I didn't have a language for that. I didn't know gay or LGBT. I just knew that how I felt wasn't like the way the other boys felt about the girls in school. The first time I realized that I was gay and that the term for it was my first boyfriend. We met in the bathroom at church.
We met in the bathroom at a church when I was 14 years old. We were washing our hands, and I just remember he looked at me. And even at 14, I knew that there was a commonality, and there was something that we had in common. Again, I didn't know the words for that. I didn't know how to define that. But I just knew that there was something we had in common. We became friends, and then eventually started dating. We didn't know how to date or be gay, etc. It was my mother's best friend, Shangela, who's male identified but performs drag. And he literally took us under his wing, and he really taught us the ropes. I remember growing up, and he would make funny references and would call me Miss Thing. So, this is the point in the interview where we divide into queer love and lust.
If you will.
Okay.
Oh, don't worry, Miss Thing.
Yes, give mama the details.
I think my first gay experience was when I was like 24 or 25. And I was, always had those gay fantasies in my head, but never materialized. But this gay experience came out of a one-night stand. You know, how your inhibitions are like somebody new when you're out, when you're somewhere else. But anyway, we were partying at a nightclub, and then some guy came and peeled me and this woman off, and he said, let's go to my place and have a threesome.
What? That sounds different. I'm just Justine from Boston, so Justine no one knows.
So we go ahead and we have this threesome, but I was more focused and animated with the woman because that's what I really wanted. I was like, wow, now is really the chance to figure out if I really like women and what this gay sex is all about.
So we did the physical act, and I remember at the end I was like, that's it. I remember it was like the relief coming off of me rather than, being uninspired. People made such a big deal about lesbian sex, and it's just people loving each other.
And I built it up in my head that it's this big, awful thing, and it's really just the greatest thing.
I remember in 7th and 8th grade what it was like to have a body like mine. And I think about this now because it's something that I've been so removed from. That was real fucked up. And I didn't process it as much as a young person because there were other things that were more fucked up about my life that I really needed to deal with. But it's really horrible, and that was a minor thing. The number of times that my bra was snapped in the hallway, or every time I sat down, not every time, but guys leaving their hands on the seat as you're sitting down to try to make contact with your booty. I learned how much I did not want people to touch me in casual spaces at all. Later on in my life, I learned that even when I am attracted to someone, I don't necessarily want that. Maybe that's because of what happened to me when I was younger.
Well, when TJ and I first got together, my kids were younger, and we survived the children. We survived the children. We survived the children, and then we bought a house together, and then we bought another house together.
How was having love that's been so long lasting change your queer experience?
TJ's my rock. When I met TJ, I saw her with another woman. And she was sitting in that woman's arms on a back porch, and I came in, and I walked through, and I said, I want that girl. And I didn't act on it. I was seeing somebody else, and that somebody else was going through a terrible, terrible drinking problem. So we'd see each other every now and then, but 2 years after meeting TJ, she was single. And my friends, it must have been about 10 of them, they all knew TJ. I didn't know her, they knew her. And I said, well, I like that woman. And we scheduled card games, and somebody would invite TJ. And I would come, and I would just be all over TJ. And she said to one of my friends, they said to her,
what do you think about Patrice?
She's a nice lady. That lady is very nice.
And I'm like, fucking nice? What do you mean nice? I don't want to be nice. So my whole community rallied together to get me and TJ to a place where we could see, where she could see me. Because I always saw her, and having this longevity with TJ, it hasn't always been easy. TJ has a big family. I have no family. I have my 2 daughters. That's who I have. And so, in her family, she's the only gay person. Well, she has an aunt, but we ain't gonna talk about that. Because I had a drug problem early on in my life,
so I don't know.
I couldn't
not
hold anything
in.
Depression will sit right in my heart, you know? So I have to get out and I have to talk to people and I have to help people. Help me work through whatever the hell is going on. And she's a great listener. And that's what I would say to you. If you have someone, make time for just you and that person. Because that's what's going to keep you together. You know?
You know?
Other outside influences will be yakking in your ear. Don't worry about that. Just make sure that that's your best friend. That you bring everything to them and know that you cannot change that person. You can't change for that person, and don't expect that person to change for you. You have to meet them where they are.
I remember my first sexual experience like it was yesterday. And I remember it because of an experience I had during it that was like, ooh. So I was 16, turning 17, and my boyfriend at the time, we had decided that we were gonna have sex, and we were.
Were y'all extra?
Extra! We watched all the pornos and literally we thought we knew what we were doing. God!
No, you better give me the details.
Yeah, no, so I remember we went, there was a grocery store called Publix.
I remember Publix.
Yeah, it's like a Stop and Shop.
Right.
And it's the same brand, and we would always park in the Publix near our home in Lake Worth, Florida. And like, just be young and dumb and in love, or quote, we believed we were in love.
Y'all were young love.
I know. I was a mess in love. So we had decided that. Okay, we're going to have sex. At this point, I didn't know gay porn. I just knew straight porn. Heterosexual, male-identified, and female-identified bodies. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, I don't know. Should I put it in? Or he put it in? What exactly to do? I don't know if I'm ready to get fucked, but I will definitely fuck you. So we pulled the seats back in the car and I fucked him. I remember thinking to myself, what is that feeling? What is that smell? So he painted me.
Y'all didn't know about cleaning out?
We didn't know anything about that. So let me tell you. So he painted me. And I thought that I had ruptured his intestines or some shit. He was all apologetic and I said, it's fine. The next day I remember coming home from school and Shangela was there and was like, I gotta talk to you.
Well, what's going on?
So me and Steven did it last night.
And?
Well, then I think I hurted him.
What you mean?
Well, when I took it out, there was all other stuff over it.
Tom, come over here.
So I called Steven over and she literally went to the store, came back, sat us down, and showed us how to fleet.
Thank God.
And that was my
first sexual experience.
Yeah, I will come out and say that I am a queer woman of color who has never, ever, ever dated or had any sort of tryst with another woman of color or non-binary person of color or man of color. It is strange. I went to college and I kind of just denied it a little bit. And I do. I have dated exclusively very feminine presenting, blonde-haired, blue-eyed women. That's what my current partner looks like. I don't know how to deal with it. I really don't. I have a really
And this
is
is
going
gonna
to sound
so awful,
but I have a very hard time finding people who look like me attractive. And I think a lot of that is probably because I grew up in a very white family. I grew up in a very white community. I wasn't raised culturally Chinese or Asian. I was raised pretty much like a white-breaded American, right? Because my family is Caucasian. I'm adopted. So I recognize that about myself. Now, when I own it, I don't know what to do with it, though. I really don't.
It makes me feel even more. It makes me feel even more.
On the outside of that, and those people who look like me, because I am Chinese and I grew up in a community where most of the other Chinese children were adoptees from China. So it wasn't really until college that I was around ethnically Chinese women, a lot of which who were first gen and a lot of whom I had nothing in common with. And I didn't really feel a desire to have something in common with.
And that's been something that I don't know if I've struggled with it necessarily, but I recognize it, and it makes me feel very confused with how I identify ethnically. So like, there's the one boat of how I identify sexually, and the other boat of I don't know how I identify culturally. But I will say that when I've been in conversation with other Asian queer individuals, it doesn't make me feel closer to them, because I feel like I'm already so far removed, and my experience is so much different than theirs already.
I've just had to demand space for myself to grow and find value in myself first. So then I can proceed into those spaces. And right now, as it stands, is that I have to go in with an armor.
Into relationships?
Into those familial spaces. I have to go in there with an armor or deny parts of myself. Like I was saying, my grandmother, when she asked me who my boyfriend is, and then I have to lie. And that's how it stands as of right now. So I think that I'm in process because I have to accept myself and move through all of those things that have taught me to hate myself or not exist at all. And then the second part, I guess, which is in process, is feeling okay in those spaces that were the genesis of those ideas. Because something has to give. I'm not gonna change because I'm not wrong. I'm fine. I'm an okay human being. I'm happy, I am thriving, and I am successful. So you, family, you have to change. You need to learn and understand and accept me for who I am. My mother's doing that. My sisters are learning how to do that. My dad doesn't care, which is daddy issues. Where I come from has not been helpful in figuring out who I am and accepting who I am. So it's about finding those spaces that do help me and to affirm and put language to and to empower myself, you know?
So what do you think is important to pass on to the next generation of queer and trans people of color?
I can, in another way to phrase it is, what's your legacy?
The first thing is that you are valid, and I think you can never start saying that early enough to anyone, really especially to anyone who is about to walk into all these oppressive systems because of who they love. From the beginning, start saying that because it takes a long time for someone to start taking that in.
You are valid. You're not crazy. You're not crazy was another one for me. I thought I was literally insane. I thought I was the most fucked up human in the world because, again, I was in an environment where everything was opposite of what I was feeling. So I would start to pay attention to the way you speak to yourself as well. That's really a mature thing for a 13-year-old to start doing. Listen to your internal dialogue. If that means to be nice, I know it sounds stupid, but it's true.
It's fascinating to be in this moment and to feel like something big is going to happen. We're mobilizing in a way, we're confident in who we are enough to move something forward. make more things happen and get energy behind stuff, I'm really excited about that.
I'm looking at a lot of the media that people take in most often, and maybe this is just in the United States of America, but the shows that are the most popular seems to be what they've always been. Very white, very middle class, and following a lot of these Americanized values that I don't connect to in my life and don't connect to a lot of the lives of a lot of people that I know.
I understand that these people who are creating this media that we're consuming are from that seed. That's where they're coming from. And so what I feel is important to push forward is all of this media, and I think that's starting to happen. All of this media that is Black and is queer. Just seeing those stories be told is just really important because I've gotten a lot out of it as a viewer of those things.
For me, and this creative community of people who I try to surround myself with, we have the tools to do that, but we need to put the pieces together. We need to find the in so that we can gain the power to be in those positions, to be telling those stories. And we're not there yet.
Mostly because I'm 24 and most of the people who I know are anywhere between 14, 15 to 35, 40, and a lot of us don't have a lot of money. I think a lot of institutional power, but I think that if we can get there in some way, then we could be telling a lot of these stories, and that's what I want to push forward.
How can we support each other from these different generations of queer people? I really wonder, how do we find each other in spaces that aren't, being specifically provided for us? I feel like there's this sense of you make your own family of queer people, and I feel really like my generation has lost some of that.
What is your queer family?
I don't know, my boyfriend, and that's sad.
Well, for gay women, we've always had to do that because there are no gay women clubs. And we aren't that big of a group for gay Black women, so we did a lot of house parties early on. And we got to know people. Those people are still in our lives today, for good or for bad, They're still here. And whenever someone calls, you rise to the occasion because this person took the place of my sister. This person took the place of my mom because they weren't around. And when you choose a family, you choose the best for you. You expect to choose the best for you. And it doesn't always happen, but you try to choose the best for you. You can do that because one thing you have in common is being queer. You don't have anything else in common. You have that. When I came here, I wanted to be here to be a part of this project. I wanted to know who you were. I want you to come and share my life with me. I want to share your life with you. Here's my phone number. Here's my house, Come over anytime. I have a house in the Cape, Come on down and visit. Because I just think that this world's getting smaller and smaller. And it's not getting any better. It really isn't getting any better.
I'm the oldest, yeah. My family is very religious and shamed my mother for having me at a young age. So me and my mom, we had to grow up together. I think about experiences that I've seen my mom have, and at 25, 24, 26, I'm like, damn, that's what that was about. But at the end of the day, we've always had to have each other's backs. My siblings, we had to teach each other how to fight. We had to teach each other the ropes together because no one else taught us that. And also because we came from a family of trauma and silence. So needing to build a strong core within my immediate family is how I define queer families and how I define that space.
My mom's best friend taught me that family isn't always just blood. It's also chosen. It's also God-given.
I feel like God brings people in our lives and they become our family. That was just something I took with me because I think that for the best of us and to bring out the best in us, we have to have community and we have to have people around us to support us. Defining family on my own because one, we had to.
We had to support each other.
Me and my siblings, we were all queer, we were all different, we were all other, both in school, at home, within our family, and our community at large. So we had to build a strong family unit together to resist in all its forms the ways in which white supremacy impacted our lives. Whether it be from violence to bullying to economic shit to being queer and like getting jumped and shit like that.
We had to resist that.
And for us, our resistance came out of building family.
I love gay people. I'm happy that I am gay. I think we have the most creative, the most artistic, the most outspoken and loving people. If it wasn't for us, I think the world would be a horrible place.
What's my legacy? Jeez. I don't know. I thought about that. I don't know I've thought about that. The older you get, the more you think, what am I leaving on this planet? I just hope I am leaving freedom to speak your mind, knowledge and education and willingness to explore and find out, and not just take people's words for granted. Like, not just take it as truth. Do your own exploration, do your own educating, and then it's all good.
I feel like as a teacher, you already left behind a legacy to your students. Did you feel like you were able to be a queer educator?
No, some kids knew that after they graduated because we would see each other out in the clubs and stuff. But while I was teaching elementary and middle kids, I would never come out to them because back then, if you touched a kid in comfort or touched someone, I didn't want anyone to perceive that it was a sexual thing. You know, it's just a motherly thing to me. So now I think it might be a little different if I were in high school. Still, I don't think elementary or middle school teachers necessarily feel comfortable coming out, not because of the kids, but because of the parents. So I was a great teacher. Kids still call me and come back and say, if it wasn't for you, blah, 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 but not as a queer teacher, just as a teacher and a black woman.
It's a fair question. In the work that I do, artistically, and I guess in my personal quest for advancement, I prioritize. For instance, I'm putting together a board for a teacher company that I'm currently the director of development.
And I have told the rest of the executive staff that I will not constitute this organization unless we have equal representatives on the board who are from non-traditional, non-white, non-cisgender male communities. And more than before, I commit myself to that.
I commit myself to having mentors and role models that I try to establish relationships with who are not white women, who are not white men. And I want to talk to people, fellow alums, etc., etc. I'm always talking to people who want to do theater and to do nonprofit work.
And also who are not white women, who are not white men, who are not white people. So I feel like for me, it's about thinking about the people who I want to see in our artistic community, seeking them out and prioritizing those relationships over the easy way to maybe get from A to B or A to C or whatever. And I think that for me, that's one way.
And yeah, calling people out and putting my foot down when I have to, when I have the power to say that we need our voices heard. We need our voices who like me and who like people who are not you. So I guess that's what I'm trying to do a lot. Because my strength as a person right now is building relationships and doing that networking, and so I commit myself to making relationships and cultivating relationships with people who are from those diverse communities like myself.
Thank you for taking time to speak with me today.
Hearing your story took me back.
Yeah, I'm still thinking about a few things.
Thank you for listening.
Here we are, 40 years apart, and still able to connect.
one is psycho, be the reina of the jungle. Mira mi tranquila vida riding on the jungle. Rado when my mama do the mambo. I so aficionado when I'm banging on my bongo. Little one is psycho, be the reina of the jungle. Mira mi tranquila vida riding on the jungle.
So, really quickly, because some folks may have to leave, if you can stay for the talk back, there's again a half sheet in your program, and if you do need to leave, if you'll please fill that out and leave it on the table on your way out. But if you're gonna stay for the talk back, which I hope you do, and I'm slightly pressuring you, not really though, we're gonna have a transition moment. So, the first part of that transition is one, in a moment, if you participated in this project as a interviewee deviser or just had some kind of participation in this project, I'll invite you up to come sit up here with us and we'll grab some chairs for you and then we'll get started with the talk back. So I'm gonna open that window. If there's anybody who wants to come up, you can. I don't want to out you in the proverbial sense. Or
I'm staring at you too though.
If you don't want to join, if you're not going to join, I'm not going to go get these chairs.
Sure, why not? I'll sit
Anybody
right.
walking?
Yeah.
Anybody walking?
All right, well, we got one. Okay, Travis. Just gonna sit there.
Do you mind being on this end, Tyler?
No.
And do you mind pulling up
Do
stage
you
a little
need a
bit?
chair, Sydney?
No, I don't want to sit. I just want to power walk everywhere. Cool. So in a moment, because I hate traditional talkbacks for the most part, I'm going to start by having you talk to one another. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes. And I didn't bring my phone with me, so you're lucky that I'm not actually stop watching you. But I will. So you have 2 minutes, and turn to someone near you or in your proximity, and just have a conversation. And just start with what stood out to you. Go.
I'm not even probably like, oh, hold it. I was like, I got you. That shit was hilarious. Y'all look great, by the way. I like how y'all were in sync. I was like, okay, I see your style. You got all black on. So, all right. You know the cause, so it's all good.
Thank you.
So how was like the devising part and getting things together?
Well, I wasn't a part of that. I was.
Well,
I think Allie was the only one that was.
I did too.
Oh, okay.
yeah, Jordan was part of it. I mean, I don't know. What do you want me to say? I'm the opening member. Exactly. No, whatever we get. That's a gag. That's actually really a gag. It makes me laugh every time.
Really?
Well, yeah, because I'm part of the reason.
About 30 more seconds.
I sent out a long text message about how I'm going to how I had to work on it. And then we have like the different stuff, which I mean you were part of when we had that meeting.
But I want to know about the green stuff, with the everything that happened after that. I love a nose.
Great. I'm going to bring us back. And is there somebody or like some groupage of folks that would like to maybe just share out a morsel of what stood out to you? There's no explanation or anything like that, but just getting some things in the room about what stood out.
We both resonate with the story about TJ, the partner, and the mom who, when their child came out, was like, I don't have time for this shit.
Anyone else want to share something that stood out or was mentioned in your group that stood out?
I appreciated that it was intergenerational, that it wasn't just like one specific lens or one specific moment. I think that's also complicated, but life, it is complicated when you're living it also, and I appreciated that that was brought into the space.
Thank you. Anybody else want to share things that stood out?
One thing we were talking about was like the moment when you guys were saying like about not basically having role models who are not just white male, white female. It was like, that's really important. Like, why it's important to have like these stories and I guess like kind of like people of color in these like power positions too. It was like, yup.
Cool. I'm not done with you talking to your partners just yet. So I'm gonna invite you to like mix it up a little bit. So I have one more question I would like you to engage with folks around you or nearish you. And this time to talk about maybe where you saw yourself or didn't see yourself in this piece. Moments where you saw yourself or did not see yourself in this piece. So I'm going to ask everyone to lift out of their chair, because I know even though you say things in theater, everyone gets real passive, and you have to get aggressive, sissy aggressive, depending on who I'm talking to. Now actually move and find someone new. Do it, please. And then take about 2 minutes to talk about where you did or did not find yourself. Move. Yeah, you can interact with Tyler.
Hi, I'm Jordan. What's your name? That is almost something that the stuff about so where did you see yourself?
There's Jacob right here.
I don't like play Jordan. We learned stories and
Like Jordan
I mean, there were stories when I told them and I was like, that's
About 30 more seconds to share.
Even though what's in my interview, yeah, there's also some parts. I was surprised
You did?
Final thoughts, and then eventually return to where you were sitting, or just in general sit down if you want.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
Would you like to start all this sharing?
Wait, what is the question?
Great, so now that we're back, I'm not going to force you to share.
Yes, you are.
I mean, I'm going to invite you, but I'm going to move us into, in a moment, hearing from people who are involved with this project. And if you would like to interject and things of that nature, you're more than welcome. Something that I'm going to turn over to these folks and then eventually open it up for you all to ask questions if you would like. But turning it over to them to talk about what this experience has been like. There were several roles that folks could be a part of, so you could be interviewed and or you could be a deviser, which meant working with interview material to create performance material. And then, or you could do both of those roles. And then there were folks who were involved in the summer and then somewhat in the fall. So there's various stages where people came in and out of this project. So I wanted to give them a moment to talk about what that experience was briefly. And then I'll open it up to you all to ask questions. So does anybody want to start? And will you also really quickly, just name and pronouns.
Allie, she, her, hers, they, them, theirs. I'm the only member of CAC left standing. I've been involved with the CAC since we started this project, which was back at the end of June, beginning of July. And we started working with performance techniques and doing some like acting work just to like brush ourselves up. Then we we practiced interviewing with each other. Then we met the elder queers. as we called the group, and we did a lot of interviewing back and forth, both us being interviewed and interviewing them, doing community interviews, like the interview, like the story about painting in Publix, like that was from an interview that I did. That was great. And from then on, like, so when the CAC when we like broke apart because everybody had so much other shit going on in like September, we decided to come back like maybe like once a week. It's like once a week for the next couple of months, and we did interviews with and collaborations with people from the ICA. So we met up with some of their youth artists, all of us creating art and sharing with each other, and then we like got to go to the ICA. And then we compiled all of our interviews, and here we are.
Can I ask you, Alessandra, what out of all of that, what has been something you maybe really enjoyed? What was something that really resonated with you, or what kept you in the project?
I definitely really enjoyed doing the community interviews, and definitely like communicating with the elder queers. They were such a lively group of people. Like I remember the first day we met up with them, I had zero energy, and I mean I was in that room for 10 minutes, and like all of a sudden my energy spiked, and like I left just feeling refreshed. And what kept me working on the project was I really wanted to work with Sydney, and I've been a part of True Colors for like 5, almost 6 years now. And so I was committed to seeing this through. The entire like piece, like hearing like stories of what it's like to be an LGBTQ youth. Like I know what my experience was like, but hearing about what it was like, you know, like 20, 40 years ago, and like how there's some stuff that hasn't changed and a lot of stuff that has, I don't know, it just like kept me here.
So other folks want to share about impact, your involvement, and what's been some takeaways or things that have been highlighted by being involved?
I can go. I'm Jordan. I use he, him, his. I was involved first as an interviewee, and then a deviser, and then now like in this role as like acting back some of that material. So I've been kind of in many hats, and I think within all of them, the biggest impact has definitely, similarly to Alessandra, has come from being able to interact with some of the elder queers. I think that it's so rare that me, as a 26-year-old multiracial queer man, that I get to interact with a 70-year-old black lesbian woman and like relate to her and like feel like we share so much of our life experience, even so separate, was really kind of like eye-opening and just like really humbling for me. I mean, some of what you heard was a conversation between me and this woman where she was like, come to my house, like I want to take care of you. Like we are the same people, the world is getting smaller. And I feel like there aren't a lot of spaces where me as a young queer person can share that with somebody who's like, who you would think is from such a different like time and place than me. So I think that has been my biggest sort of like grounding point within this project, and has kept me involved and feel like I'm getting a lot from it just in that, even in the people I'm getting to talk to.
I want to say, I'm Cheyenne. I go by she and her. I feel like I've been an interviewee and a deviser, and then in this reading, and I had a thought just now, and I'm trying to rush to like figure out how to say it. I think that it was about the willingness of people to be interviewed, and how like open, like I've listened to a lot of these interviews, and how like vulnerable and like just open people are, and like ready to like tell their stories about coming out, or about like coming out in like the 70s or something like that, or what, like I don't know, like they're just experiences,
I think that's been really what's like brought me back and like kept me involved because of what you were saying, Jordan, that like, you know, at what point in time, like when am I gonna hear one of the interviews that I listened or that I got the honor of listening to was like in the devising process was about like kind of tied to the story of like fleeting. And like, when else am I gonna hear that? Like, when else is somebody gonna be like, oh, you need to know this, right? Like, we need to tell you as like a queer woman, like, about this process. And like, I'm so happy to like be a part of that conversation, or like just have like that as, and I don't know, now I feel like I have more vocabulary and more like understanding to talk to these people, you know, like to talk to these people who do experience this thing that is involved in my community, like of queer trans people, or like I want to know that stuff, you know, and what opportunity do I get to hear that just for the sake of like hearing it, you know, and the fact that people were so willing to have that conversation and know that it was recorded and know that other people were going to hear it and that it was going to be on stage. Just this whole process, I'm like, yeah, I was like, I want to keep doing this and I want to keep giving myself to it too, as much as I can.
One more question for the panel before I open it up to you all to ask them questions. And some of you got this ahead of time, but for you, what is this show speaking to? What is it speaking to? Or what is it, another way to say that is, what is it about?
Tyler, she, and he. I think from hearing everything and being a part of devising and being a part of creating something in the interviews is that we're trying to get people to be aware of the variety of experiences that LGBT queer individuals experience throughout the ages and how that has shifted in America, especially how you guys were talking about the Asian who didn't want to identify as being white and having to come out queer and not really having that space to identify themselves or express themselves, that they're confused. What we're trying to do is kind of, well, my opinion is what we were trying to do is that we're trying to break through a mold by making it more normal, I guess. That would be my point.
Black, they or she pronouns, and I would say that this project speaks to intersectionality for sure, and like the complexities of identity and how that play into people's experiences just beyond being queer, but also being Black and queer, being a Black queer woman, and all those different, being an Asian American gay woman who can identify with her own people from her own background. So yeah, just shedding light on diversity, like truly, and bringing that in with all of the intergenerational aspects of it as well. So hearing from people who have lived at different times where in society it wasn't as acceptable, whereas versus now, I think it was Paula saying in the recording that people are coming out younger and younger. And so yeah, just being able to see those different complex identities and like how that speaks to people's experience.
I think also like just piggybacking off of those, it's also seeing the unity that like we all have within all these different complexities, all these different identities, this different intersectionality. There's like still the common theme of like, I recognize that, I felt that the way a lot of people have on a lot of these interviews, one of the things that kept coming up was like, I knew I was blank. I didn't have the words or the language to say that. And it could happen at different ages, different times, different places, but the way that like, doesn't matter how different you are, at some level there's still like a common theme between us. There's still a common bond between all of us. And that's not even just like as being members of the LGBTQ community or being members are being members of communities of color, just like as human beings, there are bonds and there are experiences that we all have that it doesn't matter how different they look, the feelings that we feel are the same. And like running through that, there's like a common theme that even if you could be so different from someone else and still be able to bond with them on like a really personal level.
I'm gonna turn it out to you all, so you can ask questions towards me, like about this process, or just like what's been going on, or you can ask these folks about their own expertise because they own a lot of knowledge as well. I'm gonna again give a shout out to Kat Nakaji over here, who's a set designer. You must check out. Kat added these like hologram sheets onto the diorama display. You have to check it out. It's next level.
And there's like a 3D printed version of this set.
But we have about 5 to 10 minutes for questions and then we're done. So I wanted to open up that jar, if there are any.
How many people are represented in the text right now?
I don't have an exact count. I would say there's upwards. So everyone is represented in quote unquote the opening, Act 1. So I went through and I pulled the same question I always ask in every interview is tell me your name, your age, your pronouns, and how you identify. So technically anyone who conducted an interview, their identifier is in the opening part of the script. Throughout the rest of the script, this iteration of the script, there's about 8 folks whose stories or whose experiences are woven through there. Yeah, and that was a really hard process to choose how that happened. Well, all right.
Did you have a question?
There was a question, but
I was just going to turn that last question back on you, Sydney. What, in your mind, having conceptualized this is understanding, like you said, things changed during the process and you had to kind of roll with things. But what, in your mind, is this about, or what does it speak to, or what were you trying to speak to?
yeah, so it started out being like, I was like, youth today need queer families because if you ain't got a queer family, you're not gonna make it. That was very much a part of my experience, right? So I'm thinking about being in college and like those people who I look to or who helped me come out, not by being like, you gay, but like by being like, hey girl, you wanna go to the gay club this weekend? And me being like, okay, right? And so like, who were these people that I surrounded myself around that helped me become the most beautiful sissy that I can become today, right? And so I started asking young people today, like, so tell me about your queer family tree. And they would be like, oh, it's my boyfriend. And I'd be like, who else is in your queer family tree? And they'd be like, my girlfriend. And I'd be like, my friend. And it'd be like one person, which is like still a family, right? Like, no judgment. And so I started there. And then I realized that things were different, right, from when I came out and what my queer experience was. So I realized immediately how I was positioned in this and how I was influencing it in some ways. To echo some of the things that other folks have stated, this phrase of multiplicity in one has been coming up for me a lot. It's so good to have people reading these other stories because for so long they've been in my head or I've been the main interviewer. And so it's been a lot of me doing a lot of internal questioning about like, how do I continue to build relationships with lesbian Black women who are 70 years old? Like I didn't realize I needed that in my life, but like I need that in my life. Like that was a missing part of my family tree that I hadn't filled in yet. I realized that there was a lot of work for people my age as far as like making sure the next generation like has the information, right? I started to realize that so many of us grew up in spaces where we had misinformation or we were being told these messages that were so oppressive to who we are. And so in this process, connecting with people younger than me, it was really about how do we get the information out there That's not the only way, but I think if we see ourselves, if we hear these stories, then it starts to make it, you know, normal, but like also just like it demystifies that like black and gay, right? Or walking through Dorchester, maybe you don't get laughed at as much, or like maybe people aren't pointing at you and things of that nature. I think lastly, I just think there's power in storytelling. The elder queers, and I'll just mention them again too, like this group of women, queer black women, just like fucked our world up, like
All up.
like just like they have, and I think that's like what it is, like at the end of the day, that's what it really is about for me, is that this relationship building that was happening between, you know, a 40, 50 year span, like building relationships with these folks, and them, and conversely, like they have so much knowledge, like it was, and we would just sit around and eat and kiki and, you know, for 3 hours, and then we would leave that room and we'd just be like, oh my God, can you believe what Miss Shirley said? Like, we were like gagging, right? And we
Literally
just like
having 30-minute conversations after being
yeah,
there for
like
3 hours.
they would leave and they'd be like, we gotta get home, it's getting dark, I can't be on the highway after like night. And we'd be like, all right, bye. And then we would just sit there and be like 40 minutes afterwards and be like, oh my God, can you believe? And when she said, and could you believe you couldn't get in the gay club back in the day without a white friend? Like,
Yeah,
what?
that's crazy.
So there was just this moment of like, wow, we can't let these people go, right? And how sad for us if they do go and they weren't able to hand over this and be like, just so you know, it's now for you to carry, right? And this came up too, but just feeling like, and I'm not gonna speak for everyone, but a very disconnected queer youth experience for folks right now. Like it's out there, there's a GSA, people are coming out younger and younger, but maybe they're not finding each other, or maybe they're not passing on bits of information that help sustain one another. Long-winded answer, sorry.
Not at all.
You sort of touched on this, but who are you feeling is your audience with this piece right now?
So it's definitely for queer and trans people of color, right? So just to be like, hey fam, what's up? I think the piece is also inviting allies in too, right? Again, witnessing, I think, is important. And then I think also too, like in the piece, you know, we talk about, and there's more of this that didn't end up in the piece, but, and several queer and trans people of color talked about this, but the transition of moving to Boston, and there's a line in the show where it says, white men just saw me as my black dick. Or how even in the queer and trans community here in Boston, it's very divided along racial lines and class as well. Allies, queer and trans people of color, primarily youth and intergenerational audiences. The elder queers, I think, are inviting some friends here tomorrow.
Yeah.
I gotta check in on that. They do better with phone calls and not emails, so I have to be like, hey. The national tour, to speak more specifically to where this piece will be going, the national tour is a variety of communities, so we'll probably be in a lot of heteronormative, cisgendered, particularly white spaces. And we have to come in there and be like, you need to know about this, right? And you need to engage with it in a way that respects these stories and then honors them as well. Before we go, anybody else want to toss another one out there?
When you said about having a queer family, like, I'm bisexual and I'm married to a man. Like, growing up, I was attracted to women and I was attracted to men. I had a girlfriend I couldn't handle it. She called me all the time. I was like, oh, this is not for me. So now I'm married to a man
who I said to him, he's like, so how do you feel when we're talking about sexuality? He's a very religious man. He left his church because he says, our son is gay, and I'm not going to be in a church that doesn't accept it. So now we go to open, everyone goes there, gay, whatever you are. So and I told him, we had to talk about it, and he's like, so how do you feel now about being married to me? I said, I still find women attractive. I mean, I'll show you a nice ass when I see it, but I love you. You know, I said, I see a nice woman, you know, and I play a virtual game, and in that game I have a girlfriend because it satisfies that side, you know. And I talk to her on text message, I have a baby, how you doing? And she's married too. So, you know, but I love this man. But I'm like the type of person that can love anybody. I don't care. You know, and then when my son came out to me and I was laughing at some of the scenes, you know, he came out, he's like, first he said, Mom, I think I'm bi. I'm like, oh, okay. Then he comes up, he's like, I got something to tell you. I said, what is it? He said, I'm gay. I said, baby, I don't care if you wear tutu or fart sparkles and twirl around. and then me and my mother had this argument. I'm like, oh, this is because, you know, we're Cape Verdean, Italian, and all that stuff. So I was like, oh, we're arguing. Okay. Mom, Tyler's gay. And then all that argument, my mother's like, that's okay. Nowadays you find a nice husband, make sure he's a nice husband, and that's it. So but it's hard though because of the nationality and being in that thing, you know, like that.
Just remind me, who was the one who came out for me?
I did. I told him. I said that. I said I want my baby to be. You know, I was like, my baby's gay, and I'm proud of it, and I don't care, and I'm all for it. I got a shirt that says, you know, I'm like, baby, look, with all the rainbows and stuff, and I'm all. I mean, this is hard. For like people being so stupid not to know that love comes in everything, you know? Yeah. And I like my whole life, he's always been around gay people, drag queens. Because I used to go to Man Ray. I don't know if you all know what Man Ray is. Back in the day, Cambridge, everybody went there. And it was open to everybody. And they already had the mixed bathroom, nobody had to worry about, you know, you just, hell yeah, Man Ray girl, look at her. So it's just, you know, it's just, I think this is great. I think you should take it to the schools. Because a lot of the kids are like, you know, a lot of involved. I mean, I always knew, I'm not going to tell, oh, you gay. And I would ask my friend Jimmy and Pablo, who were married, I said, my son's gay, huh? He was 5 years old. And said, and then Pablo's like, I think he's going to be gay. I was like, oh, God, I don't know. What am I going to do when he comes out? You know, these are all the things that I worried about. Because, I mean, my kid's wearing my heels and putting a rose in his mouth and going, Mom was like, you don't do that. I say, why not? And he would ask me for a doll, and I would give him a doll. My mom's like, he's not supposed to be playing with dolls. I say, he can play with dolls because he's my son.
Right. Well, okay. I think you see a lot of that intersectionality here in this show, right? So I think there's one point, specifically around coming out, where 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0 are these examples of what that looks like or can look like. And that's not always what people's experiences look like, but I think that was a great modeling or some examples of like how that can happen or how adults in those lives of folks can be affirmative and supportive. Like someone comes out to you, you're the mother of someone's friend, but they're like, I think I might be gay, and you're like, you might be. But then like being like, I'm not gonna tell your secret until you're ready, right? So there's a variety of ways I think that is starting to speak to it, and hopefully represent that there's a spectrum of those experiences. I'm going to walk to stage center now, and I'm going to look into the camera, Ernie, and I'm going to say thank you all for coming this evening.